Hello and welcome back to the When You're podcast, the podcast for when you're doing anything. Today we're talking about when you're watching Monsters Incorporated or just Monsters Inc. Anyways, dude, I don't know what it is with like these Pixar movies. They always somehow or another circulate back into your into your life. They certain moments happen and you're just kind of like, I remember that, or I remember a certain moment, or something happens to me and I kind of just out of the blue, it just pops out of nowhere. So that's what I've been feeling with Monsters Inc. I've been feeling like certain moments have been happening where it's like I feel like I should rewatch that movie, and I did. And I gotta tell you, it's such a classic. It's such an amazing. It's a great movie, first and foremost. But I just felt like there was so much about it that I don't know why it just connected with me all of a sudden. But I always take that as a sign, or as like a moment to really hold on to what I'm kind of going through. You know, certain things pop up into your head because it's supposed to. Certain things work inside your mind when they're supposed to. Some things are just meant to be that way. And I feel like in this moment, I was meant to rewatch this movie. So in a lot of ways, I felt like this was just like the perfect time to watch it. And it was kind of like a symbol for something. I'm not sure what, but it was kind of just like take what you can from the movie. So I think the first thing that kind of interested me about it was the whole monster world. Is like, what would because when we think about monsters, they're like mind-killing machines, right? But if they're just creatures who just attack and kill. But what if they all lived together? What if there were all a bunch of monsters? You know, like let's say the world gets taken over by monsters. Then what? They just keep on killing themselves? Or eventually they adapt, they evolve, and they get civilized like us. You know what I mean? If we were taken over by aliens or monsters and stuff like that, what would happen? They wouldn't just keep on doing the same old, right? They would eventually have to survive. They would eventually have to adapt. They would eventually have to learn about the area. Otherwise, they would just, there would be no point in it. They would have to get more and more evolved. So that's kind of what this monster world shows us in Monsters Inc. It kind of just expands on what happens when monsters live together like humans. And I was always a little surprised that they were, I'm not going to say they were like tiny, but like some of them were gigantic, and then some of them were like Mike Wazowski. You know, there's a huge difference in between those two characters. But even more, something more interesting, I think, was when we go inside the factory and we figure out how the doors are such an important part of their society. So it just essentially, if you haven't watched the movie, spoiler alert. I don't even know how many times have I said this. Spoiler alert. If you have not watched the movie, you have to go watch it before you listen to this. So first and foremost, the door works as a gateway, essentially a passage to the human world. And in the human world, they scare children. And by scaring children at night, they get power for in the form of gas, or their scream kind of fills up a gas tank, if you will, right? And once it fills up a gas tank, they can take it and they can it powers everything in their city. So that's what they're working with right now. And I was watching. Well, I wasn't really watching. I saw a clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse, is it Neil deGrasse Tyson or is it Neil deGrasse? I always mess up his name. I'm so sorry, but I was watching him. He's very big on science and space and stuff like that, and he was talking about the fourth dimension, and Monsters Incorporated kind of shows that very well. He said pretty accurately. It's just like you open the door and it takes you to this whole nother place. It takes you to this whole nother other space in between that we can't really comprehend, but that's essentially, or at least he says that's essentially how it works. That's how we get through. That's how the fourth dimension would work, theoretically, speaking. He says. But another theory behind it is that it's all time travel. So essentially, the monster world has evolved over millions of years or thousands or however long a time has passed, right? And they've evolved into monsters or humanity, animals. Something genetically has happened where monsters in the far, far, far future, the monsters have populated Earth, and now they need human screams, except humans don't exist in their world. So the only way to get human screams is to go back into the past when humans were alive. So the doors are a time-traveling device that is used to go back and scare children of the past so that way they can continue to... They can fuel their city, they can get electricity and such like that. And that's actually not a bad theory, that's not a bad idea. That's something that when I first heard it, I was kind of like, that actually could make sense. That, that's not something I can deny or something I could be like, no, they're two separate worlds. There's a monster world and there's a human world. It's like, no, wait, that could definitely be plausible. And I do like that theory. I do like that idea of it. Now let's get to the real issue, the real crisis. What happens when humans cross over the door, right? So if we're talking about, two separate worlds, human world and the monster world, what happens when a little girl or a human crosses over? What happens when she comes through? And we see that in the movie. Hilarity ensues. It's a huge big problem. It's a big deal for Sully. It becomes a big problem for Mike Wazowski. It becomes a big problem for the company. It becomes a big problem for every little thing that happens down the road. So moving forward, what I was kind of thinking was, what would happen if it was an adult? Like, what would happen if, obviously she's a little girl. She doesn't know, Boo is a little girl. She doesn't know any better. So her crossing over, she just sees Sully as like a big kitty, a big fluffy creature, soft and cuddly and cute. Whereas if humans, more adults saw it, they would be freaking out of their minds. They would just immediately run away or run back. There wouldn't be a big old, what's it called? A big old problem. Because she's so young, because she's so free, because she's so funny and she just doesn't have a care in the world, and she just kind of doesn't understand her environment. She just feels like she's on an adventure. Then it's a lot more fun. There's a lot more to come from it. And I guess that's obviously what they were going for. That makes a lot of sense. But overall, I wouldn't say that it wouldn't be interesting to see that kind of dynamic with maybe somebody a little older. It would be a lot more, I wouldn't say scary. It would just be, it would have to be a lot more technically, it would have to be a lot more technical in the sense that the way that they get back, because for Boo, a lot of it rides on Sully and Mike getting her back. But now with another adult in the room or somebody of who's capable of thinking, then it takes everybody working together. It would be more intellectual, which I guess is not the point. It's supposed to be emotional. It's supposed to be about feelings and how it all comes together, because eventually that's what leads to the debate between screams versus laughs, right? So we see that firsthand when Boo cries after Mike gets upset about his teddy bear, and she starts crying, and the lights start flickering on, and it starts going all over the place. And then Mike does something stupid, and then she starts laughing at him, and then we see it completely explode. So looking at that difference and understanding that early on, Sully kind of gets the idea that, wow, so all of a sudden the lights were messing up because she was crying or screaming and upset. But then when she let out positive emotions, it just destroyed all the power. She was just full of energy. You know what I mean? And I thought that was a cool difference between negative emotions and positive emotions, or feeling certain things at different times. I actually really enjoyed that idea. I thought that was really good. And I don't know if that would necessarily be true, if our screams or us being terrified would be less powerful than our laughter. Although it does depend on some people's laughter. Some people would be yelling and hollering and screaming at the, just ha ha, just really getting it out there. And then other people are kind of like a spray bottle. They're, they don't really, you know what I'm saying? Like some of them are loud, some of them are softer. But what I'm trying to get at is I like the whole debate between scream versus laughter. So when you're watching it, you kind of have to piece it together in your mind. Who are the real targets? Or what kind of feelings change as you get older? So like obviously they go after kids because they're easy to scare, right? They're easy to scare, and when you scare them, they let out the emotion a lot more effortlessly. You scare them, they scream at the top of their lungs. You make them laugh, they laugh hard, And when we get older, it feels like it takes a lot more to get a rise out of us, maybe, or a lot more to surprise us or shock us. So I think if you're older, it would be easier to scare and scream and like be like that, as opposed to laughing, I guess. But I do think that the harnessing of it is what's important, and the shift in the movie from screams to laughter is what's really important. And I just really like that message. I really like that feeling about that kind of shift in the world. It's kind of a way of pointing the finger at ourselves and the way we do business or maybe work with people, and we kind of treat them negatively, or we might do something bad, when instead we should try to figure out ways to be positive and to do good, and that way the business will thrive a lot more. You know what I mean? And everybody enjoys their job. Nobody has to be scary. Nobody has to be mean. They can all just have fun, dress up, and be silly. I think that's kind of what I get from it. And I also wonder is like, because Boo was able to come in, there's obviously no toxicity between the two, I think, or that I know of, or that I can remember. So what would happen if humans and monsters lived together? Or what? You know what they should do next? A monster goes into their world and just, obviously they've done that with the abominable snowman, and they do that. I guess they exile monsters into their world and they become fables. So maybe Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, the Loch Ness monster, like all of these different creatures that have been mythical subjects in the world are probably monsters. You know what I mean? But it would be more interesting to see, to maybe see a different monster out there. And, live side by side with humans. Kind of a deal. You know what I mean? I guess that wouldn't be too interesting. But all I'm trying to get at is monster and humans living together side by side. It probably wouldn't be good. It's probably best that they stay in different worlds or different times. Because if they came together, it would just create massive war. And that's what nobody wants. There'd be a lot of discrimination against monsters. And maybe humans. Probably the humans more, because if in a full-on fight, we would probably lose because they got a lot more advantages over us. Now, at the end of the movie, right, it's shown that Sully gets to see Boo again in her room. And I guess it's implied that she's kind of grown up now, or that he just gets to see her again. And I do like that they keep her hidden, or they never show her again in the movie, because it kind of just puts it in our brain like, oh snap, how is she? Has she grown up? How long has it been since they last saw each other? Is she like a year older? Is she 2 years older? Like, where is she in her life? And it's kind of that interesting feeling of seeing an old friend again. And she still remembers him. It wasn't like a random dream. She remembers him and Mike, probably. So it is weird. And I do wonder, like, how often he might check up on her, or when she might eventually tell somebody else about the experience and what happens because of that. What happens when something incredible happens to you when you're little, and then nobody believes you, or people are just like, oh, you have such a crazy imagination. But it's like, no, that really did happen. But I do think that because the time had passed and there is like a little time and gap in between them, they're able to, when they come back together, it's a lot more special. There's definitely a lot more space for love, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't matter what happened yesterday, it doesn't matter what happened the day before. As soon as you get back with that person, it feels like, two people who really care for one another come back together, and they're still bonded. There's still love there, and it doesn't matter how much time has passed by or how much time has gone on. All that matters is we're back together again, and it can be fun. It can be good. It can be back to how it used to be, sort of a deal. And for some reason, I just keep on thinking about, in that moment, I keep thinking about, like, what would happen if she didn't live there anymore? Like, what that door is supposed to be a part of that house. So, like, what would happen if, like, they completely moved to some other place? They would just find some other random girl or some other random person in that room. Like, what would happen then? That would be wrong. That would be wrong, but it would kind of be funny. And so I say all of this about Boo because I've been, I've definitely watched the videos about the Pixar theory. I can't be the only one who has, but the Pixar theory, if you don't know the Pixar theory, you gotta look it up on YouTube. They explain in full detail how all the Pixar movies are connected. They're all a part of the same universe. So, but they just happen in different times. So, Monsters Inc. is part of the Pixar, all the Pixar movies. Essentially, all the Pixar movies are connected, and you have to go watch the video to explain it even further. But there's a theory about how Brave, the movie about the Irish redheaded girl, Brave, where the mom turns, another spoiler alert if you haven't watched Brave, but long story short, there's an old witch in Brave that people believe to be Boo. Now, this old witch became obsessed with magic and became obsessed with time travel because she wanted to find Sully again. So what happened was she was a little girl, and then she grew up and she started telling people that there was a world of monsters, but nobody believed her. So she became obsessed with magic. She became obsessed with time travel. And so she's been trying to go to different places throughout time and throughout different worlds in order to find Sully again, in order to reunite with him in a sense. So that's why I was kind of talking about, like, no matter how much time has passed or where they meet up eventually, the love they have for one another is still there. And we see that when in the movie Brave, she's an old lady and she's in her shop or her little magic spell room, and she has all of these little wooden bears, all these little wooden creatures and stuff, and they kind of look like Sully, or they look like a bear, or that she's obsessed with those animals because they remind her of Sully when she was a little girl. So that's how those two movies connect, or that's how it all loops back around. That's how it becomes one movie and then another movie, and they all bond with one another. And then it's also said that the monsters are evolution of ants. So in A Bug's Life, there's not really any humans, or we don't see any in the movie. So it's implied that the humans have died off. We as a species have died off, and the bugs are all that's left over. And over time and time and time, the bugs have evolved, and got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they turned into monsters. And these monsters then take over the world, and so on and so forth. So that's how the monster world is created. That's how the monster world becomes the next thing, essentially. So that's another connection between those movies, and there are any number of them, between Monsters Inc., between Wall-E, Bug's Life, The Incredibles. Like, it all forms together. Now, we see Monsters Inc. We understand Monsters Inc. We understand the energy business, how the world functions and stuff like that, because we see something so integral to the world. This is how they get electricity. This is how it powers their stoves, their lamps, their city life. Everything is powered by screams. But there are obviously more jobs out there. And I just thought that, wouldn't it be cool to kind of see those other jobs, or kind of get a deep dive into some certain monster species that are, I don't know, strategically advantaged at certain jobs or become skillful at them. So a big monster like Sully, he obviously works for the scare business, but what if he was also in construction? Like, that would be cool to see, like, different monsters living in different houses or in different cities and different buildings, and depending on their circumstances or what kind of monster they are, their home is dependent on the architecture or how the house is made. So if you're like a slime sticky monster or whatever, and you like cling to the walls, then you might need like a non-stick wall, or you might need non-stick furniture. You know what I mean? Like, there's any number of things to get you to move regularly, or to have a nice home, so that way you don't always get stuck and you can move freely. You know what I'm talking about? Something like that. Or, and you would like to see how they construct it, how they build, a building like that. What about like a monster's restaurant, Because we kind of see some of that in Monsters Inc. when they go to that sushi restaurant, or they go, and I'm talking about when they go into it's kind of like Benihana, where they make the food in front of you or whatever. That's kind of what it is. What if they showed us a different kind of incorporated, a different kind of job, or a different kind of business, other than the energy plant? Even though that is so heavily associated with the movie, that's what the whole movie is about. But overall, when you're watching Monsters Inc., I want you to think about what would you do if you crossed over into like the monster world? Like that would be crazy. I want you to, when you're watching it, just be like, do you think they're time traveling or do you think they're going into like another world per se? Would you rather cross over into the monster world as a kid, like if you were just like 4 years old and you didn't know anything, or would you rather go as yourself now? Do you think screams are more powerful than laughs? Like when you're watching it, just be like, the scream is definitely a lot more. I feel like that would definitely give a lot more. Could you live side by monsters? And definitely look up the Pixar theory. If you look up the Pixar theory, I think you'll definitely become interested in it. And I gotta rewatch it because I didn't just now. I'm just trying to remember what I can from the whole thing. But overall, definitely go watch Monsters Inc. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you guys all next time. Thank you.